Biospiritual harvesting. As we pull back the curtain, we are examining a few ways that the negative alien agenda hide the practice of soul and energy harvesting in plain sight, the manipulation of collective consciousness, and the cost to the human soul when abandoning the natural laws, so that many human beings cannot even recognize when they are being violated. We look into the practice of organ transplantation as an example, both the black market harvesting of organs and the practice of blending soul blueprints enmeshed in tissue when body parts are traded. We look at how the physical body and soul-spirit body are connected and how living in alignment to natural law supports health and consciousness expansion. When this knowledge is suppressed, the anti-life agenda can take hold more easily. We will take a look into the suppression of the astrological sciences, with special attention placed upon medical astrology, the influence of planets and constellations on our health, and the physiological correlations to the galactic zodiac. In considering the violation of natural laws that humanity has been taught through the social engineering programs of the death culture, this month we look deeper into the ways that the negative alien agenda promotes these violations to intentionally fragment the spiritual body and generate a host of spiritual abuses and physical diseases that are ultimately designed for human biospiritual harvesting. Many humans carry out these agendas because they have no idea that they are being used to produce more spiritual harm in the collective consciousness of humanity, or they have been groomed into sociopaths, people that lack remorse and empathy for the pain and suffering of others. The human body at biological and spiritual levels contains enormous amounts of potential energy that work similarly to a storage battery. The human body is made up of thousands of biochemicals that continuously interact, creating different chemical reactions that are a natural part of the biological and spiritual processes that generate many forms of potential energy. Potential energy is stored and released from the interactions made between the biological and spiritual layers of the human body, whether it is asleep, at rest, or active, and as a result of its position and movement in the electromagnetic or gravitational fields. As a result of the human body and human consciousness being such an abundant supply of potential energy and kinetic energy, the negative aliens have found many parasitic methods in which to harvest this collective energy yield for their benefit to the detriment of humanity. Humans and the earth body have an incredible supply of many forms of potential energy that are being collected through biospiritual harvesting methods. These methods are found in many standard practices that are socially accepted because most people are completely unaware of the damage this generates in the electromagnetic field of human beings, both in the physical body and in the spiritual body. Collective consciousness, or systems of human energy fields, can be harvested and directed to put elemental substance into motion in order to shift matter into artificially formed timelines. This energy yield can easily be converted for the purpose of powering up anti-human agendas. All forms of human biological and spiritual energy that are harvested from human body parts or mass consciousness energy that is collected to gain control over matter and influence events to be repeated into artificial timelines is described as biospiritual harvesting. In order to maximize the life force energy harvested from the living fleshly creatures, the negative alien agenda have introduced many harmful practices to hide the agenda of biospiritual harvesting of humans on the earth. Mainstream science tells us that the main source of energy in the human body is from what we consume as nutrients that are converted in the mitochondria and then stored as ATP molecules in the cells. More accurately, the multidimensional consciousness bodies are the main source of energy current in the cells of human bodily tissues. And when a human being chooses to develop their spiritual bodies, they gain increasing access to higher potential forms of spiritual energy and consciousness intelligence inside their physical body. For example, the soul, monadic, and avatar consciousness bodies store accumulated light energy in the ATP molecules throughout the cells of the physical body when they are embodied. When the spiritual body is not active in the physical body, this results in mitochondrial dysfunction and cell death. The accretion and absorption of more light and energy into the cellular matrix and tissues of the physical body is a function of expanding consciousness that occurs through the embodiment of higher spiritual layers. Potential energy. Ascension is the complex quantum mechanics governing the movement of available energy in a consciousness body as it travels through time and space. The original human DNA template allowed for sequential increases of potential energy accretion from the spiritual bodies at the biological ages of 12, 22, 33, and 44. When the potential energy available and its movement in time shifts, whether this occurs through entropic or syntropic systems on the earth, this change in the field directly impacts the intelligence and consciousness levels of the masses. Human consciousness perception, as well as attitudes and beliefs, reflect the energy potential that is available to that body in that location. When less energy output is available to the masses, this yields a lower quality of consciousness perception, such as the state of survival consciousness. When there is more energy available to the masses, the higher energy output yields a much more developed individual, with an overall higher quality of consciousness perception that increases intelligence factors in the masses. The quality of energy potential can be measured through the observation of increasing and decreasing levels of barbarism and violence that become standards of acceptable behavior in the dominant culture of certain Earth demographics. Geographic areas that have been plundered and pillaged with never-ending war on the ground for multiple millennia suffer the most energy loss, and the direct consequences of that loss of energy are reflected in the cultural beliefs and attitudes that form in the population of that demographic. To produce barbarism and slavery in any population, the controller uses divide and conquer tactics to systematically produce closed energy systems by imposing gradual increases of energy debt while removing public access to free energy resources. The subtle energy circulating within the human physical biology and human spiritual anatomy are intimately entwined and interconnected, so that what happens to the physical body in the material world also happens to the soul spirit consciousness body in other dimensional realities, and vice versa. There is no way to separate the internal circuitry of biological energies from the spiritual energies in an organic, ensouled human, as the fleshly body is the spiritual home that is designed for the original soul spirit. In order to sever this interconnection, the negative alien agenda have implemented the transhumanist agenda to hybridize human bodies with artificial intelligence. The original consciousness blueprint and the cellular memories that are recorded in the physical biology and the spiritual biology are one and the same. Those entities limited to the lower creation realms do not have the consciousness level access to read those memories, while those in the higher consciousness realms, or that are cosmic citizens, can read these memories. The spiritual biology is a living light organism that manifests its consciousness design through incarnation, and the soul's purpose is made through the expression of the physical human form. Thus, we are addressing the harm committed against the collective human consciousness through the intentional mass mind control that normalizes spiritual abuses through the accepted practices of bio-spiritual harvesting throughout the negative alien agenda's death culture. Physical body is vehicle for spiritual expression. The physical body and fleshly form that human beings inhabit in the material realm is ultimately designed as the vehicle of expression for the multidimensional consciousness bodies that exist throughout the density levels. Density levels essentially define the location in the timeline where that aspect of the human being or life form is having a consciousness experience and is traveling within some kind of body. Most people are unable to sense their own higher consciousness aspects as the result of the negative alien mind control programming, the amnesiac barriers, nets, and alien implants that were placed in the lower earth body to suppress the global consciousness. Yet, there are aspects of the higher self that exist within the light body layers that are enmeshed with the cells of the physical biology, and these are also called stations of identity. Through the manipulation of the mitochondrial functioning, which impairs ATP production, this method works to suppress the embodiment of the stations of identity. The stations of identity refer to the anatomy of the spiritual layers of the original consciousness blueprint design of human beings, the light body, and what we refer to as soul, monad, and avatar consciousness. Each expression of the God Source in its collective consciousness body or individual life form has many stations of identity that exist in each of the dimensional realities or harmonic universes. To become unified with the God Source, we must learn how to live in harmony with the natural laws. As we live in harmony with the natural laws, we integrate, heal, and unify all of our spiritual expressions in time that had become stuck, harmed, or traumatized by learning life lessons through the direct experiences we have that teach us how to evolve. We cannot evolve if we cannot learn from our experiences. The learning process generally occurs with the explicit help of our higher spiritual identity that helps us to recollect our other aspects and their fragments that have existed throughout the time fields. Throughout each density, the various stations of identity are subjected to different laws, that govern the structure of consciousness movement throughout time and space in that location. These laws instruct characteristics that impact the stage of evolutionary development that manifest as platforms of consciousness perception and spiritual expression that are unique to each person's location in that time and space field. Many physical vehicles can seem to exist in a similar relative time and space in matter, yet the spiritual vehicles are existing within vastly different levels of the consciousness spectrum and within an entirely different dimensional timeline. The point of divergence within the consciousness spectrum is more exceptional during the current ascension phase of planet Earth. The visible light spectrum in the physical realm gives us an extremely limited perception of the energetic reality. As an example, the spectrum of reality that a consciousness body located in the fifth dimensional timelines would perceive and express through their vehicle is completely different by comparison to the vehicle with the consciousness body perception located in the artificial intelligence timelines. In each dimension and bodily form, the laws governing structure and potential energy changes, which alter the consciousness perception and access level that is available to that specific life form. Altering perception via soul fragmentation. In order to change, alter, or control the consciousness perception of humanity, and to shift the location that the collective human consciousness is traveling in time and space, the negative alien controllers would need to modify the natural laws in the blueprint structure of the planet. To modify the natural laws, they used artificial intelligence technologies, which generate inorganic, archetypal forms into the planetary mind that are sourced from previous artificial time loops that continuously recycled fragments back into manifested creation. It is similar to saying that the current timeline keeps repeating itself in automatic time loops that are recycled from the cellular memories of the past hidden histories of war that have been erased from the conscious mind memories of humanity. These accounts were previously described in the newsletter Historical Timeline Trigger Events. This way, the unconscious humans keep recycling and repeating the same trauma patterns of previous historical war dramas over and over again. Through assorted mind control methods used to keep the global population perpetuating violent and divisive anti-human behaviors, this generated severe harm to the collective soul, further increasing the belief systems that perpetuate the anti-soul agendas. The goal of the controllers is to make sure humans forget we have souls and to disconnect us from our spiritual body in order for the soul to be more easily harmed and harvested. If we do not realize that we have a spiritual body, so we don't make an effort to connect with our higher self, then most people cannot determine what are harmful actions or abusive behaviors that fragment the soul even further. When the soul or spiritual layers are split apart further, this produces disease in the layers and generates more and more potential energy to be harvested for the parasites. Disease in the body is the result of soul sickness that is related to the consequences of action while one is living in discordance with the natural laws. Soul fragments generate more split aspects, which the parasitic entities can use to harvest into different forms of usable energy on multiple dimensional planes. This is why they promote extreme violence and trauma-based mind control designed for soul splitting and soul fragmentation in the Earth population, because the more fragmented and in pain people are, the more energy they can siphon. Thus, the negative alien agenda intentionally violates the natural laws on Earth through the use of artificial intelligence in the form of psychological and biological warfare to further spread disharmony, division, and disease in humanity. The main strategy is to download and perpetrate the predator mind belief systems and hybridize with the human body to promote acceptance of anti-human, anti-soul behaviors as socially acceptable beliefs that are continually enforced by the controller pillars of society. The gradual acceptance of predatorial parasitism and total ownership of human bodies as personal property exists at both the biological level and at the spiritual levels. Treating the human body as an inanimate object that can be spliced and diced and then sold for profit is another component that allows them to extract massive loads of energy to carry out their biospiritual harvesting agenda. Science of right living. The science of right living includes the basic truths that are found in the ancient wisdom teachings that require the student of life to deeply inquire into ethical matters, which help guide them towards building a humanitarian-based society with the goal to provide the best quality life for all human beings. Over the ages, this truth of right living was understood by many sages, philosophers, and humanists that were responsible for educating members of society and instructing them on how to live in harmony with the natural laws of their environment. This truth is revealed to and discovered by the pure of heart, and those who have the most perfect and most universal love are given access to the most perfect knowledge. At its most basic level, the science of right living is essentially understood as this: when we live in harmony with ourselves and others, we are living in harmony with the universal laws, and this drastically increases the quality of life for everyone. As an example, the law of one practices are a science of right living given to human beings. To receive more love, we must become more loving. In the comprehension that all things are made of intelligent energy and are a part of the All One, we know that if we commit harm or hurt others, we receive that same harm onto ourselves. When we are subjected to harm that we cannot see or perceive in the environment, we have been made ignorant to the natural laws, and we become complicit in repeating harmful behaviors by carrying out spiritual abuses towards ourselves and others. Spiritually abusive behaviors are the content propagated through the negative ego mind. Thus, these thought forms make us confused, depressed, sick, and unhappy. This is why we must apply effort to clean up our negative ego, so that we learn how to practice spiritually healthy behaviors that align us to the natural laws, which bring more harmony, grace, and positive spiritual presence into our body and life. Right living is not intended to impose moral judgments or sanctimonious religious beliefs upon any person's choices that directly impacts the quality of their life, or to judge how these thoughts, behaviors, and actions influence the people around them. Right living is to help inspire us to remember that the main purpose of Earth incarnation is for evolving through spiritual lessons that return the soul back towards living in harmony with the natural laws. The quality of life for all people is dependent upon the quality of our society. The truths behind the science of right living are to teach people how to live in harmony with themselves, their environment, and then to extend those same principles to their family, communities, and then into the global scape. Thus, the Law of One practices are important guidelines to follow in the science of right living. As you practice these guidelines every day, the quality of your life increasingly improves over time as you align to be in harmony with natural laws. All experiences we have in our life are the result of the relationship we have with our true spiritual nature. When we have health and fulfillment in our life, we are living accurately to our spiritual purpose. When we are sick, suffering, and deprived of fulfillment, we are living inaccurately to our spiritual purpose. Thus, to find our true spiritual purpose and live in fulfillment and happiness, even while in this chaotic world, we must deeply inquire on who we really are in order to find the truth that exists inside ourselves. The growing diseases in the population today are the result of the continual violation of natural laws and the repeated violations made against the constitution of humankind at personal and collective consciousness levels that interconnect through the cause and effect in the timelines. To find the cause of disharmony and disease in the human body or in the earth body necessitates finding where the laws of nature have been violated and where there exist conflicts between the spiritual consciousness and the ego personality. Fear, guilt, and shame have the most toxic effects upon the body, mind, and spirit, and these are at the root of the most common causes in festering diseases. To find the root cause of disease in a human body, it is necessary to comprehend the existence of the spiritual anatomy and to determine why the spiritual consciousness and personality are conflicted or fragmented. A high percentage of diseases today are directly caused by the repeated violation of natural laws that generate trauma through the perpetuation of spiritually abusive behaviors. These include toxic exposures being directly inflicted into the environment, as well as the negativity the person directly inflicts upon themselves. Most congenital diseases are carried over from other stations of identity in relationship to the consequences of actions produced in other timelines, combined with environmental miasma and toxicity. In many cases, if the root cause of the disease is found and removed, if the physical and spiritual body are being considered as one in the same, if the spiritual lesson is understood and personal habits return to harmony with natural laws, rapid healing will follow as the natural result. In considering the violation of natural laws, let's look at the ways the negative alien agenda intentionally fragment the spiritual body in order to generate a vicious circle of spiritual abuses and physical diseases. Organ transplantation. First, let's review the surface of the billion-dollar business of selling human bodies through the practice of body trading, organ transplantation, and the incredibly destructive effects of organ trafficking that directly impact the quality of human life in the physical reality. As is predictable in the negative alien agenda's social engineering of the death culture, the human body is worth more money dead than alive. Trading human bodies is a profitable and growing business, with a transplantable kidney's current market value being approximately $262,000 in the United States. Today, organ transplantation and organ harvesting is a massively profitable and booming business model based on the procurement of human body parts, which raises a host of bioethical and spiritual issues. Without ethical consideration for the existence of the soul, these practices do not consider the damaging effect that transplantation of organs and tissues has upon the soul and spiritual anatomy of those involved. Organ transplants are a medical procedure in which a human body part, such as an organ, is removed from one human body and is placed in the body of a recipient to replace the damaged, diseased, or missing organ. Organ and tissue donors may be living or considered legally brain dead or dead via circulatory death. Common organ transplants include the heart, kidneys, liver, lungs, pancreas, intestine, and thymus. Tissue transplants include bones, tendons, cornea, skin, heart valves, nerves, and veins. All body parts come with a hefty price tag. Across the globe, the most common organ transplants are the kidneys, liver, and the heart, which are sold at exorbitant prices, many times to the highest bidder, in order to be transplanted immediately. As a result of the global demand for healthy human body parts for transplantation that far exceeds the numbers available, the commercial business and black market forms of human body trading and the trafficking of human organs and tissues has skyrocketed. Illegal organ trading nets more than $1 billion each year. The extremely profitable business of selling human body parts has made those involved disturbingly complacent about the unethical ways human bodies are being treated during and after the death process. Organ harvesting is directly related to human and child trafficking and transplant tourism, where human body parts are bought, sold, and traded by any means necessary, with no questions asked about where and how the body part was taken. The demand for kidneys has reached epidemic levels in the United States, as when people are desperate, they are willing to take desperate measures. As a result, desperate people are going to the black market and unwittingly conspiring in the stealing of organs, often taking them out of victims without their consent. In addition to unscrupulous doctors and organized criminals, people are commonly murdered for their organs. And most times it is in the poverty-stricken areas where trafficked children or those that are severely underprivileged are exclusively targeted for their organs. What makes this even more painful to consider as a complete waste of resources is the high rate of rejection in transplanted organs. Transplant rejection occurs when transplanted tissue is rejected by the recipient's immune system, which destroys the transplanted tissue. Whether or not the organ is rejected, the fact is that a person with a transplanted organ will be a major medical consumer of immune-suppressing pharmaceutical drugs for the rest of their life. When putting such outrageously high price tags on the quality of life and wellness, while treating human bodies as inanimate objects to be traded back and forth as commodities, the constitution of humankind is violated. The body brokers. In the highly profitable market for human bodies, almost anyone can dissect and sell the dead for parts. When people believe that they are helping advance medical studies by leaving their bodies to science, they are actually donating their body to commerce, the buying and selling for parts. Many donor services are businesses that attract poor people that cannot afford funeral costs, so they donate the body of their loved one. The donor industry model hinges on access to a large supply of free bodies, which come from the poor, many of whom cannot afford funeral costs because they paid for expensive medical treatments for their deceased family member. Many body brokers pay hospitals, hospices, and morticians referral fees to solicit customers to sell the idea of donating the body. There is a big market for dead bodies, combined with little to no regulation or public awareness, so this is an area being aggressively exploited with damaging effects. As an example, an American donor company makes $27 million in revenue by recruiting body donors through funeral homes, hospices, and online ads. And to ensure the quality of body parts being sold and to maximize profits, they use the same production methods and quality control model developed by Ray Kroc, who built the fast food empire McDonald's. The human body is being treated like a commodity in the fast food industry, an assembly line of production of body parts that feed the predators that exist both in the physical plane and elsewhere. Legal criteria for brain death. Since the 1960s, laws on determining the criteria for death have been implemented in all countries with active organ transplantation programs. Before this time, traditionally, both the legal and medical communities determined death through the permanent end of certain bodily functions. When the demand for organ transplantation started to rise, the legal criteria for determining death was changed, whereby the body could still be alive, but the person could be considered legally dead. Today, both the legal and medical communities in the United States use brain death as a legal definition of death, allowing a person to be declared legally dead even if life support equipment keeps the body's metabolic processes working. In some countries, everyone is automatically an organ donor after diagnosis of death, fitting legally accepted criteria. Without consideration of the soul and spirit working through the physical body, what could be the implications of declaring a living body brain dead in order to harvest living organs to be transplanted into another human body? How many people are declared dead when they could be revived? When the human body is worth more dead than alive in matters of commerce, it is common sense that says the exploitation factors are grisly. These are facts being shared on the surface levels that can be visibly seen, which generate incredible destruction and disease in many human lives, while impairing general integrative wellness, as well as committing violations that greatly harm the soul. It is important to note that the legal criteria for death was changed in the late 1960s to accommodate mass organ harvesting and to consider the ethical implications and agendas behind it that impact human society. Genetic cataloging of Earth DNA. Additionally, to understand more about the history of our planet, it is helpful to know about the human controller and non-terrestrial interest in gaining control over the genetic library that is found on the planet Earth and within the DNA of all of her inhabitants. Transplantation of tissues, cloning body parts, and experiments on mixing genetic material are the specific agenda of the Black Sun groups, who are behind the anti-soul philosophies of eugenics, genocide, and controlled evolution theories. There are many non-terrestrial groups involved in genetic modification and testing experiments upon Earth inhabitants that carry out this agenda to gain access to a massive catalog of genetic material. The primary reason behind abduction has been for gaining control over the genetics of this Earth, and to use those genetics to open stargates and to amass the genetic catalog that could be taken into other planetary systems. The genetic material incarnated and found on Earth will only survive long-term and procreate while on the Earth timelines, as all living creatures born here are genetically key-coded to the collective soul of this planetary body. This mystifies alien groups who try to break the code to gain access to immortality and who desire to take Earth-based genetic codes to hybridize and be cloned anywhere in the universe. They cannot figure out how to keep this DNA alive for the longer term elsewhere, except with principles of transplantation, hybridization, and cloning, which dilute and digress the human DNA. What happens on the Earth's surface through organ harvesting and transplantation is only a small sliver of activity that mirrors what is occurring in underground bases and off-planet. The mad scientific experiments from the times of Atlantis that mix and match interspecies DNA, many times with monstrous results, and without considering the painful impact perpetrated upon the consciousness bodies. When we better understand the negative alien agenda's bio-spiritual harvesting agenda that spiritually abuses human beings in order to increase the torment of the people on this earth, it is obvious that these practices are not only violating laws of nature, but violating the spiritual constitution of all human beings. Now let's look at the spiritual factors and the unseen consequences that are generated from these harmful practices that demonstrate the violation of natural laws. Spiritual abuse in organ and tissue donation. Every human being has a unique combination of spiritual forces and physical forces that make up the entire constitution of that person. And this information is enmeshed within their cellular material. It is recorded in every part of their body. The physical tissues are imbued with the intelligence of the soul that has spiritual imprints that are unique to that individual. If you cut out an organ and transplant that tissue into another body, the soul and spiritual imprints carried in the transplanted tissues are now enmeshed in the body of another unique individual soul. The physical and spiritual layers of the donor and the transplant recipient are now forever entwined in all of the energetic consequences of the actions that had happened behind the event and within all people involved. If the organ was received from an unwilling donor or they were potentially murdered for their organs, the incredible pain and destructive elements will be carried forth in both the soul of the donor and in the physical body of the recipient. The impacts to all involved are incredibly destructive, especially when the transplants take place without any recognition of the soul and the consciousness that is involved in the process. In such destructive situations, the transplanted body parts can be used as demonic homes that set up a variety of spiritual attachments, fragments, demonics, and harmful portals in the donated organ itself. The cellular information in the transplanted tissues will attempt to communicate with the consciousness and the body of the people involved, which can create a host of spiritual problems and break down into more physical issues. Every organ has a counterpart organ in which it seeks balance. And in healthy functioning bodies, the parts communicate with each other. Transplanted organs do not have the same birth imprints or unique DNA messaging of the recipient, which can wreak havoc in the internal circuitry of the body, making them even more dependent on the medical system and taking drugs. It is extremely harmful and even painful for the soul body to feel its physical counterpart being cut open and used for parts. In many cases, it generates horrific spiritual trauma to the consciousness. This is especially so when the body is alive and the person is declared brain dead because the soul has not yet left the body if it's still alive. If the body remains alive but the person is brain dead and their organs and parts are harvested, many times they will attach themselves to the recipient's physical body. They may be in shock as they watch their body be cut up for parts while they were unable to speak and defend their body. This may in effect change personalities and create the problem of multiple soul attachments connected to one human body. The current medical practice of organ transplantation supplied by the human body trade has very serious spiritual consciousness body implications that overall promote even more diseases and human suffering from the violation of natural laws. Spiritual body attachments that get enmeshed to physical bodies with their transplanted organs so they cannot leave the earth plane. Mismatched body parts that generate spiritual blockages from incompatibilities in the unique arrangement of spiritual forces that make up the spiritual anatomy. Soul fragmentation as a result of the shock or trauma that is experienced from the destructive elements of the events taking place. Alteration of birth imprints and blood record that may alter the spiritual purpose for that individual in the physical body they inhabit. When the blood record changes from the use of transplanting different filtering organs, this has effects on the consciousness development and stations of identity of that person. Soul binding that occurs from the dark entities that take advantage of the pain and suffering of the people involved in order to harvest their potential energy. Satanists are able to procure body parts that are used for a variety of ritual purposes as they are aware the soul record is recorded in human tissue and the body part can be bound or harvested for hungry satanic entities. When we understand more about how our consciousness and physical bodies work in alignment to the principles of the natural laws, then we are more equipped to recognize the violations that are directly related to producing more worldwide suffering, deprivation, and disease in all human beings. Universal human body. The human body is a total living energy system that mirrors the microcosm in the macrocosm, which is composed of smaller parts of consciousness systems that reflect the same principles in the laws of structure that are directed throughout the cosmos by the universal laws. Each human being has transcendent value that is sacred in universal law, the law of one, as every person is exceptionally unique, and that there will never be another exact consciousness copy. Each layer of the physical matrices in the human body have an energetic blueprint and consciousness counterpart that is unique to that individual, and which acts as a gateway into the spiritual world. All body parts, organs, glands, and physical tissues are intertwined with the consciousness functions of the spiritual anatomy. Therefore, all of these functioning systems are influenced by birth imprints that govern the metaphysical forces that make up the unique blueprint of each individual. As there are physical raw materials that are used for building a material structure, there are metaphysical raw materials for building a consciousness body or spiritual structure. Although we cannot see the metaphysical raw materials that make up the spiritual forces that are present in the physical body, these elements are completely enmeshed within every cell in the body. Every person is a spiritual being composed of a variety of metaphysical raw materials that recombine into a unique arrangement of spiritual forces, which gives each person a unique blueprint as well as a unique nature. The spiritual nature of each person is determined by the metaphysical forces of creation in combination with the architectural blueprint, which are based upon mathematical principles that can be studied through musical and chromatic scale, as well as the study of astronomical events that inform us of the relative positions of celestial objects imprinted at birth. Astrology is an important science of studying the unique arrangement of the metaphysical forces occurring within the spiritual anatomy that lost its academic standing as a credible science due to the negative alien agenda's infiltration towards worldwide adoption of the scientific method. The study of the astrological sciences were traditionally considered to be for advanced scholars and were common in academic circles until the 20th century. Astrology in the current times is labeled a pseudoscience, which is used to discredit its validity and purpose in studying the laws of structure, to keep humanity ignorant of the study of the astronomical patterns, which inform our personality through many different forces of consciousness influences. When we study astrological patterns, we are studying magnetic imprints that are relevant to the function of our bodily layers. We can then determine those patterns that influence our higher or lower spiritual nature, and then decide to make corrections. Thus, proper use of the science of astrology allows us to better determine if we are accurately living in our true spiritual nature and potential. It informs us of our lessons and challenges, as well as what we came to the earth to resolve and transcend. Without deeper knowledge and awareness of how these astronomical patterns impact us, 3D human consciousness goes on autopilot, uninformed of the massive forces and influences to which they are exposed every day. The spiritual development towards transcendence of these archetypal and celestial forces of polarity in order to return them back into neutrality becomes even more important during the ascension cycle. Cosmobiology and medical astrology. Many of the ancient wisdom teachings understood the mathematical concepts of connecting the universal human body and its correlation to cosmobiology. The mathematical and astrological correlations were made between the principles in the cosmos and its relevance to organic life forms, as well as the necessity to study the effects of these cosmic forces and the stellar movements and astronomical conjunctions that impact the world of forces on the Earth. The Pythagorean mystery schools taught that the solar system is one massive musical instrument, and that the 12 signs of the zodiac may be compared to the semitones of the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale is a musical scale with 12 pitches or frequency tones, each a half tone above or below the tone next to it. This same structure also represents the architecture that exists within the dimensional scale of the holographic reality. The 12 planets constitute the white keys of the cosmic musical keyboard. Each constellation is an intelligent consciousness body that transmits spectrums of color wave frequency and mathematical coded patterns connected to building metaphysical structures into form. Each constellation represents an astrological sign that responds to certain frequency tones and color waves. Some of these frequency tones blend together and are harmonious, while others clash into discordance and distortion. As we can sense the disharmony and conflict made between certain notes of a piano, or feel the distortions running in mainstream music, this impact has the same effects within these metaphysical forces. There are similar themes of harmony or discordance that transpire between the alchemy of forces that occurs within the various constellations of the zodiac, the 12 planets, and various celestial bodies that have a great effect on human beings. These instruction sets are inherently recorded in the spiritual blueprint and design of every human being on the earth. When incarnated into a physical human form, we evolve through the stages of the precession of the equinoxes, and this progression takes us through all 12 layers of archetypal forces that hold instruction sets for the universal human body structure, as well as levels of DNA transmission. As the sun moves through each constellation, we receive frequency exchanges of intelligent instruction sets that are designed for the human body to evolve towards increasing DNA activation and spiritual ascension, which are alchemical forces being transmitted into the earth field. When astrological alignments occur through major conjunctions made between planetary and stellar bodies, forces of alchemy occur, which alter frequency current and manifest new creations that help to expand consciousness at planetary and personal levels. With the war over consciousness humanity is undergoing, psychological operations to prevent them from actually participating or being aware that these stellar forces are being transmitted to the earth for purposes of bio-spiritual evolution. Mystery schools developed the field of iatromathematics, or medical astrology, and viewed the entire matrix of the human body through astronomical and astrological principles, as well as the biomechanics. The 12 astrological signs contribute to specific laws of structure that are incorporated within each part of the human body from head to toe, inside and outside. Moreover, planets and the existing cosmos in space are directly correlated with certain parts of the body that are designed to overall unify the layers of consciousness structures. Through examining a natal chart, iatromathematicians studied the patterns of the birth imprint as the star or soul body, and were able to study the various combinations of energetic forces and how these forces impacted the human body and consciousness. By observing the behavior profile that would show general tendencies in constitution and disposition, they would become aware of the specific patterns in that individual to help guide them towards aligning with their highest nature and achieve the state of health and well-being. Each of us can study our own astrological patterns in order to gain knowledge about the internal workings of the self. Medical astrology reflects the law of principle in each of the 12 constellations that has association with maintaining the structure within the parts of the human body. From the Guardian perspective, the galactic zodiac includes another important constellation called Ophiuchus, which is the missing 13th constellation that acts as the unifier and trine force for all of the other 12 constellations during the ascension cycle. Thus, in our model, the constellation forces that are represented are the 13 signs of the galactic zodiac, which preside over the parts of the body, covering the body from head to toe. Please refer to our newsletter for the graphic physiology correlated to the galactic zodiac for more specific details. The human bodily form represents the movement that is made through the precession of equinoxes, with each astronomical and astrological principle having direct relevance to our physical and spiritual anatomy. When we remove or transplant body parts, we are removing imprints and specific principles in our bodily structure that alter and change consciousness influences which have consequences to our spiritual development. Not to mention the potential issues in overall biological functioning, such as internal circuitry disconnection between transplanted organ systems that can block integrative and holistic healing for the body, mind, and spirit. Ophiuchus is the trine unifier. In addition, with the Ophiuchus transmissions, the divine fire-water element acts as the trine and unifier between each of the squares in the combinations of 4 constellation groupings that make up the cardinal signs, fixed signs, and mutable signs. In the previous cycles, the spiritual blueprint of humanity included many squares and oppositions in the birth imprint from certain planetary or constellation conjunctions that generated disharmony, discordance, and distress. These oppositional forces placed limitations upon the spirit and resulted in a variety of spiritual oppressions, miasmatic patterns, and karmic burdens. It is similar to say that squares, oppositions, and limitations that are recorded in the geometries of the spiritual blueprint can be understood in the birth chart and are the result of the consequences of actions, unlearned lessons, spiritual purpose, and the debts of destiny that have been carried throughout multiple lifetimes. The earth body also has its own blueprint that is made up from the collective consciousness records of humanity. So when incarnating into a timeline on the earth, we are also imprinted with the karmic burdens of the collective consciousness imprint at the time of incarnation. It is also accurate to say that the negative alien forces had control over aspects of the 12 constellation transmissions, which had resulted in more extreme negative polarities in the world of forces, in order to achieve their intended objective of control over matter forms. They intended to radically increase black subtle forces by filtering negative polarity aspects of the constellation archetypes in order to influence humanity into the negative polarity and to use planetary dark matter for running artificial intelligence machinery. An example is to observe the negative polarity accumulation in the Libran constellation principles in the masses, which represent energetic balance in the world of forces, and to observe when destroying energetic balance through violating the natural laws, rampant disease is generated. Libra rules the kidneys. And when we see the rate of kidney disease exploding on the earth, this imbalance of the scales can be considered a potential factor. These discordant frequencies in the birth imprint can be described as the vicious circle, the challenging oppositional patterns that bring intense conflicts between the personality and the higher self. In 2013, we began the Ophiuchus transmissions, which are to be simply understood as the flow of harmony and divine grace towards humankind during the ascension cycle. This allows for many releases in the intense squares of opposition recorded in the original birth blueprint and helps to restore the karmic pattern back into a more gentle flow of harmonious and aligned frequencies. Ophiuchus transmissions can be consciously participated with during each cycle to help release oppositional magnetic imprints in the birth chart, although it will happen naturally when you surrender to the process. The last cycle of Ophiuchus transmissions had themes of releasing and clearing harmful blood covenants in the intergenerational binding of the family of origin lineages. There are 3 primary activation areas in the body that act as the unifier of all chakra centers and body parts. First, the tailbone and sacral area. Second, the higher heart complex, and third is the center of the brain and sphenoid. The divine water fire of Ophiuchus transmissions are designed to better harmonize the elements present in the body through the release and clearing of discordant patterns of opposition back into the trine field, unity, or what's called the peacemaker pattern. Recently, some waves of ascending people underwent changes in the transduction sequence links that were defined in their original birth pattern on Earth to clear blood covenant records. This elevation out of third-dimensional incarnated karmic birth patterns during the bifurcation has been a result supported by the trine unifier of the Ophiuchus transmissions reaching a critical mass last December. In considering this month's newsletter, please remember to apply common sense and non-judgment towards any human being that has been put in the position of organ transplantation or being cajoled into becoming an organ donor. We live in times of great deception and falsity in a controlled system of inversion, where storefronts like the medical system are massively profitable businesses which are actually acting out the opposite of what they represent themselves to be. This theme has been offered for deeper education, for developing clarity about the universal human body, the reality of the spiritual anatomy, and to deeply think about the nature of the reality we find ourselves in today. The issues we have on Earth are extremely complex, and they won't be solved overnight. The first step is understanding the many ways that our society is violating the laws of nature right under our noses, so we can see how we may be contributing to these violations without our awareness or consent. When we are informed and aware about what we are facing on Earth, we automatically have the personal power of choice and consent, which allow us to return back to align with the natural laws. Please only take what is useful for your spiritual growth and discard all the rest. Thank you for your courage and bravery to be a truth seeker. Until next, stay in the luminosity of your avatar Christos Sophia heart path. Please be kind to yourself and each other with a loving heart until next month.